Hello, Land Talker TV followers. Jim Rothermich here, Iowa Appraisal in Des Moines, Iowa. I am a land appraiser for Iowa Appraisal, and I cover the whole state of Iowa. And I also am the Land Talker. And if you ever want to have access to all the land auctions in Iowa, I have a newsletter that goes out once a month and it's a free subscription. If you go to www.iowaappraisal.com, there's a way you can sign up for that newsletter and it comes through your email once a month. I'm also part of Land Hero, which is a subscription-based way to get access to my sale database. And the reason why I do that is people need that information. It's current sale database. So one thing here in Iowa, I've seen a great increase of is sealed bid auctions. And if you're wanting to bid on a farm in Iowa, all you have to do is get a subscription to Land Hero. And if you only need one county, we can take care of you. If you need 3 counties or crop reporting district, we can take care of you. And you'll have current sale information to make that bid on that farm. If you're a realtor and you need fast information, in a county or several counties, crop reporting district, it don't matter. We've got current data. All you have to do is go to www.landhero.us and check it out. And we'll be glad to do a demo and talk to you about a subscription. Well, today, I'm excited about the person I'm going to interview. And, I created Land Talker TV to talk to influencers in agriculture and people that affect farmland real estate indirectly and directly. And I think we got somebody here today that affects it directly, and that is Murray, the father of farmland investing wise. And I'm just tickled to death to have Murray come on today and pick his brain and listen to his thoughts about what the farmland market's doing and what he thinks about the future. And welcome to Land Talker TV, Murray.
Thanks, Jim.
Murray, I know you've got a wealth of history with you, and let's just start out from the beginning. I know you was raised in Southern Ontario, so can you kind of talk about growing up and how you got to Iowa State? Let's do that.
Well, Jim, it's kind of a wandering story, if you will, on the basis that I was born and raised in Southern Ontario on a grain and livestock farm. Probably as a teenager, I was inflicted with ADHD on the basis that I had trouble paying attention in school, and high school was a challenge. And I eventually left that to join my father, and I farmed for 3 years. And I decided there must be more to life than being a hired man. And so I begged my way into Iowa State University. In that era, they had the winter quarter program for basically kids who were interested in farming only. And I did well enough in the winter quarter program that through the great efforts of Dr. Harold Crawford at the time, I came back in the fall of 70 as a full-time student and made my way through Iowa State, fortunately. And had the great opportunity prior to that of buying my first small farm. I was only 17 years of age. And so upon graduating from Iowa State, I returned to Southern Ontario, keeping in mind that most people don't recognize that Southern Ontario is about the same latitude as Austin, Minnesota. Okay, it's not far north as most people think of Ontario or think of Canada. And so I returned to Ontario, traded my 80 some acres into a half section, and developed a very substantial grain and livestock farm. Thanks to Nixon and wage pricing controls, which most people don't even remember or probably weren't even born, he attempted to limit price increases in that 73 through 76 timeframe. And at the same time in Southern Ontario, there were several large steel plants around where I lived. Prices skyrocketed in Canada and other countries at the same time. They were attempting to control them here in the United States. That led to an opportunity to sell my farm for a very substantial price. I had already returned to Iowa for a down payment the first year on 80 acres and later on a down payment on 160 acres. And so I returned to Iowa in 75 with the intention of actually farming. Very hard to get farm machinery, believe it or not, at that crossroad. And as a result of that, I went to work for a division of Continental Grain in their feed milling division for a short period of time. Shortly thereafter, I had an opportunity to join the sandwich companies in Clarion, Iowa as a farm manager. Selling farms was sort of a real natural to me, if you may. And for a short period of time, I sold a tremendous number of farms, primarily to investors. They just seemed to be a natural to work with. And then in 82, I moved to Champaign, Illinois to open an office for the sandwich companies there, and then had an opportunity of buying that operation in rather late to 75 or rather late to 83, or no, late 85, closed in 86, formed the Westchester Group. And in addition to being a farm management company, quickly involved into putting together a series of limited partnerships for individual investors. And that took us to the pension industry by 1989, and we became a very substantial player in acquiring first Midwestern farms, then farms all over the U.S., high quality agricultural farms all over the U.S., and eventually even outside of the U.S. So that's kind of a snapshot, Jim, if you will, as to my background, as to how I got into that business.
Wow, that's a snapshot for sure, Murray. Talking about Southern Ontario, you know, that's interesting that you moved here from there. And so, what did they grow there when you was there for crops?
Well, most people have a hard time realizing or visualizing this, but corn and soybeans, on the basis that corn and soybeans were the two major crops in Southern Ontario. In addition to that, there's a fairly major wine grape growing area. There's a major tobacco growing area. It's being surrounded by the Great Lakes. They have a very moderate climate compared to Iowa. But my first winter quarter at Iowa State University, my goodness gracious, thought I was going to freeze to death. It was so cold. And I had very rarely saw the temperature below zero, where in fact here in Iowa in the winter quarter of 69, 70, I saw the temperature at minus 15, minus 20, minus 25. I thought that I didn't realize how human beings could live in such wild temperatures. But Southern Ontario, there's a major agriculture growing area there. And most of the major international seed companies all have a seed production facility in Southern Ontario. So it's very different than most U.S. citizens visualize, if you will, Jim.
So, so give people perspective. It used somewhere between Detroit and Buffalo, or
Right.
how would
Yeah.
you describe that?
Between Detroit and Buffalo, slightly north of there is where I farm. But yes, that's the geographic area between Detroit and Buffalo.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. And so they raise corn and beans there. And so what about livestock? Did you guys have livestock there?
Big livestock area, big dairy area, very big chicken production area. But we raised a lot of livestock in my own personal farming operation. I had both a purebred hog operation, a veal calf operation, and 150 beef cows.
Wow. Holy cow. That is impressive for that type of livestock there. Now today, do you have any family back there farming today, Murray, or how is that?
Not farming, Jim, but I had family back there that's dwindled down to the point where I only have one older sister left. I have a bunch of cousins who live in that area. I have a bunch of friends who farm in that area, and it's still most, again, U.S. citizens. I don't mean to be picking on U.S. citizens, but most U.S. citizens have a hard time visualizing what a major agriculture
Oh
area
yeah.
that is.
Oh, I'm one of them. I remember the first time we met and you was telling me about that. I had no idea it was like that there. And, you wasn't you're that far from Detroit. And I did not know that Canada, come down that far south.
Keeping in mind, Jim, that the most southern point of southern Ontario is south of the North California border.
Yeah. Interesting. I did not
Part of
know
southern
that.
Ontario is south of the North California border, and most people do not realize that, needless to say.
Yeah. Yeah. Now, today, if you go back there, as far as livestock, I mean, I'm sure there's still corn and beans, but as far as livestock, is it kind of the same or has it changed over the years, or how would you say it is, Murray?
It's very much the same. Keeping in mind the city of Toronto, the capital of Ontario, has more people in it than the total state of Iowa. Okay, so
Mhm.
there's a fairly significant population in that geographic area, of which their feedstuffs are furnished by the livestock industry of southern Ontario to the greatest extent.
Yeah, 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 yeah. So how big was your farm there at
Well,
that time?
I owned right at 320 acres, but I rented an additional 400 or 500 acres, which doesn't seem like much today, but in the early 70s, upon graduation, that was a fairly sizable farming operation, particularly given respect to all the livestock that we had, that I had.
Sure, sure. Now, you graduated high school, and what made you decide to go to Iowa State? I know Iowa State is a big deal to you, so can you kind of talk to that?
Well, first of all, Jim, I'm embarrassed to tell you that I never graduated from high school, number one. Number two, I begged my way into Iowa State University, and thanks to Dr. Harold Crawford, Professor Harold Crawford, who believed in me, he got me into the winter farm program in 69, 70, and then came back as a full-time student in the fall of 1970.
And you promised him you was going to do good. You said, if you give me a chance, you're going to do good. Something like that, right, Murray?
Well, it's not only I promised him; it was that he promised me if I didn't do good, I was going to be gone. Because I'm one of the few students you'll ever talk to, Jim, who started full-time school on probation. They gave me 2 quarters to maintain a 2.5 grade point, or I was agreed to be gone, peacefully gone. The letter agreement said.
Yeah, yeah. And you wasn't going to let that happen, did
I
you?
worked hard to try to prevent it from happening. Fortunately.
Yeah. And so, what was your degree in, Murray, at Iowa State?
Well, I'm also embarrassed to say, Jim, that my degree was in plant pathology. Although, if you have a problem in your yard at home, don't call me, on the basis that I wandered around Iowa State after Professor Crawford got promoted on to head up the ag education curriculum at Iowa State. I just kind of wandered around and took whatever courses I wanted. I was taking all these agronomy courses, animal science courses, ag economics courses, and about 2 quarters before I was supposed to graduate, I realized I didn't have enough courses in any one subject to graduate. And I stumbled across an individual by the name of Professor McNabb, who had just started the plant pathology department. And so he took me under his wing and provided me the opportunity to graduate.
Yeah, yeah. And so you graduated Iowa State and you thought, well, I'm going to go back and work with dad. And so we're in the early 70s at this time period, right?
Correct. And it wasn't, yes, my father supported me with some machinery, but it was a total separate farming operation about 50 miles from our home operation. So it wasn't quite a typical father-son relationship.
And was you married at that time or about to
Yes,
get married, or where was you
no,
at with?
I married a young lady from Linville, Iowa, and
Okay.
she migrated with me all the way back to Southern Ontario, which, needless to say, was an experience from her point of view.
Yeah, no kidding. She probably had never been to Canada until she met you,
That's
probably.
also correct.
Yeah. Okay. So I'm assuming you met at Iowa State.
Yes.
Yeah. Yeah. And so how was the farm economy back then in that time period? How would you describe it back then?
I would describe the farm economy, particularly the livestock economy, Jim, as very vibrant. And that's what allowed the opportunities, from my point of view, that allowed me to establish a farming operation in your fine state of Iowa. And my timing was very fortunate. I can't say that I was smart enough to know that's opportunity was going to be there, but the opportunity was there, and the farm economy was it was a transition time when you look at the price of corn, Jim, where we went from essentially $1 a bushel of corn to $3 a bushel of corn in the early 70s, almost overnight, and that created tremendous income changes and challenges within agriculture throughout the nation, for that matter.
And so And what caused that rapid increase in corn prices? Was it the export market had ramped up at that time, or was there anything in particular?
No, it was in the early 70s. It was the first Russian wheat transaction
Okay, I remember that. I
where they
remember.
just floated, I mean, through some rather confidential negotiations. They had buyers who floated into America and bought millions of bushels of wheat in a literally, I'm exaggerating, in a 24-hour period, but it was within a week. And all of a sudden, people realized uh, our American grain was worth a lot more money than it had been trading hands for, and Russia had had a major crop failure, and they bought, again, I wish I could quote the exact number, but millions and millions of bushels of primarily wheat, but I think they had an appetite for any grain product that was available as a result of disastrous weather conditions that they had experienced. And so the ag economy throughout the world, but particularly from our point of view here in Iowa, took just a quantum overnight leap. And again, land prices did the same thing. We went from, in my opinion, on the quality land in Iowa went from $300 to $500 an acre to $1,000 to $1,500 an acre, and literally it just seemed like a week. And I'm sure it was longer than that, but in a very short period of time,
Yeah.
value changed dramatically.
Yeah. I was a kid back then at probably grade school age, and I remember Dad talking about the Russian grain theft, and I didn't really know what happened, but I kind of, what you're saying is kind of what I've heard, yeah, that was some good times in agriculture back then. So you was in Canada, and then what made you decide to move to Iowa?
Well, I always had a desire to come to Iowa. As a student at Iowa State, I stayed up at 10 o'clock to watch the evening news, only from the point of view that living in a major metropolitan industrial area like Southern Ontario, I had never seen ads for corn herbicides, for hybrid hogs, et cetera, that were advertised on the news media. And I just had a real almost fantasy that agriculture could be so important here in Iowa, which it was, and it is. And that was sort of the catch, if you will, that really triggered me to wanting to come back here.
Yeah. And so, you know, I'm from Missouri, so we don't have this black soil in Missouri. It's kind of a ashy, I'm not from way down south where it's red soil, but it's kind of a gray soil, ashy soil. And that's something that always impresses me when you go north of I-80, how black that soil is, and the organic matter in that soil, and just, it's just really good for raising corn. Um, Now, so, you talked about Ontario. What was that soil like back in on southern Ontario?
That soil was more of a clay loam soil, Jim, had some sand content in areas. And I would call it was not that black soil that you described north of I-80. That black soil north of I-80 just caught my attention. It's so productive, it's so forgiving, it's so many great characteristics, which people who live in the middle of it don't adequately appreciate, in my opinion. And in Southern Ontario, our yields were probably on average 80% of what the yields were here. And it's just the soil of the quality areas of Iowa are so productive. And as I've already said, so forgiving. They just amazed me as to how rewarding they could be.
That's the thing that I noticed the most comparing, we raised crops there in central Missouri, and I come up here and they're so much more consistent, even during a dry year. If that subsoil moisture is there, they're going to raise a crop. If they don't have a bunch of 100+ degree days, they're going to raise a crop up here. We didn't have that down in Missouri. You'd lose a crop, and when I mean lose a crop, there was hardly anything out there to harvest. And that's the biggest thing I notice here. And those black, like you said, those black soils are forgiving. They will take a drought, and you'll still raise you might not be a bin buster, but it's still, you got something to sell. That's what I noticed the most.
And in my experience, Jim, was exactly the same way as yours in Missouri. It's just that the quality soils of Iowa are so productive and so forgiving. It's unbelievable if you're used to farming in a geographic area other than that.
Yep, yep. I totally agree. Totally agree. So you bought your first farm in Iowa. How much did you pay for it in Iowa?
$500 an acre.
Is that wow? And about
And
mid
all the neighbors
70s?
and all the neighbors in 1973, and all the
Okay.
neighbors were sure I'd never get it paid for. And I actually bought it in 73, closed March 1st of 74, but everybody laughed at me being foolish enough to pay $500 an acre for an 80-acre tract in northeast Iowa.
And did you borrow money for that? If you did, what interest was you paying for that?
The it was a it was a contract for deed sale,
Okay, gotcha.
financed by the seller, and I believe I paid 7% interest, which I thought was
Seven.
incredibly high at the time.
Yeah, yeah. And did your dad, when you told your dad, what did he say? You're losing your dang mind for paying
That's
that
exactly.
kind?
No, no, you have lost your dang mind. It wasn't losing, lost. Okay.
Yeah, right, 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 right. And so then you bought that and then kind of go through what happened after that.
Well, I bought that. Then the following year, again, my calf raising operation was generating tremendous profits in southern Ontario, and that provided me with enough money to put another down payment on 160 acres, which I think I paid $800 an acre for just a year later. Very inflationary period of time, and um, went on from there. That I attempted to come back here with the idea that I was going to farm, when in fact machinery was so difficult to acquire, believe it or not, that I abandoned that idea, went to work in the farm management, farm real estate area, and then eventually in Illinois created a series of limited partnerships for individual investors. And at the peak of that activity, we had 330 limited partners all invested in farms. The only thing we bought were high quality farms. The first farm we ever bought in 1985 or six was in Saragordo County, adjoined Mason City, and I think we paid $1,200 an acre for it, and it rented for $115 an acre. And I quickly learned the way to keep investors happy is send them two checks a year, make sure the next check is equal to or greater than the last check, and everybody will be happy. We had 330 limited partners. We had an annual meeting every year, and we only had one investor ever to show up for an annual meeting. They were just joyful receiving some proceeds from their farming operations. Then that series of 5 limited partnerships provided us the opportunity of persuading the government pension industry to invest in farmland. And that's when Westchester Group really exploded. First became a very substantial Midwestern company, acquiring lots of, and where we had a small equity interest in everything we bought. And then from a Midwestern company, we became a national company and eventually an international company owning only farmland. When we became a national company, we got heavily involved in California and in the almond industry and in the wine grape industry and other such specialty crops. But again, it all involved agriculture. And again, the same principles that you alluded to regarding Missouri versus Iowa, Jim, the same principles exist. Look for the quality soils and figure out what you can grow on those quality soils. And there's a high probability that you'll do pretty well.
Right, 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 right. So so you moved to Champaign, you moved your family to Champaign, Illinois to start
Yes,
Westchester, is that right?
correct.
And so how did you get Westchester? How did you
Well,
come up with that name?
I the when I acquired the book of business east of the Mississippi River from the Sandish companies, an Iowa State graduate friend of mine who is now in Minneapolis in the farm mortgage banking business, he called me and said, I understand you made this acquisition. I said, yes, that's correct. And he said, I would like to find somewhere between 12 and 18 investors, and we'll come up with 100% of the money to make that acquisition for 25% of the company. Well, that was a deal made in heaven from my point of view, and I quickly took him up on it. And then we sent out this questionnaire to the spouses of all the new shareholders, asking them to vote. We took a New England roadmap and chose a bunch of names: Westchester, Winchester, a whole bunch of trying to imply old longevity. And I think we got 10 votes back. 9 of the 10 votes voted for Westchester. So that became the name of the company. Now, that was the good news and bad news. The bad news is everybody from the greater Chicago area. And I did not know at the time that there was a suburb of Chicago called Westchester, a very small little community. So everybody assumed I was from Westchester, Illinois, when in fact I'd never even heard of the place. And um, anyway, we progressed from there, shall we say.
Right, right, right. No, interesting. So that's why you're the father of farmland and institutional investing is you was probably the first one that started that and with Westchester and and so we're talking, in the mid 80s, when you started out buying farms for investors, did you hit the market just right, didn't you, Murray?
I absolutely did, Jim, and I would like to tell you it was a whole bunch of good planning when in fact it was nothing less than sheer luck from my point of view. Yes, I believe the timing was right. I believe the opportunity was right, but there was a lot of sheer luck involved in the timing of doing that.
Um, the 80s, that was just a rough time of the year, or not a year, but that decade was tough. I mean, it even carried over into the 90s. And you want to just kind of talk about what caused that and your thoughts on it took some people took 20 years that bought a farm in the early 80s and the values dropped so low it took 20 years to get back to even. What all caused all that, Murray? Just kind of speak to
Well,
that.
I think the biggest cause, Jim, and your question is a great one, but the biggest cause were interest rates. I mean, prime rate skyrocketed in the early 80s to 21%, backed off to 18%. Everybody thought they were half reasonable. And when we moved to Champaign, Illinois in 1982, our residential mortgage was 12%. I mean, can you even believe such a thing? And again, there's many farms in the 70s cash flowed at 6, 7% fixed rate to mortgage money. But when mortgage money went from to 12 to 18%, I mean, their cash flow just turned upside down. And it wasn't, the farmer to the greatest extent was still a very productive, very efficient operation. He just couldn't pay his interest bill. And at the same time, commodity prices had backed off from lofty levels in the mid 70s, a product of again, the Russian grain fiasco. And then commodity prices backed off modestly, but interest rates skyrocketed. And it was a very challenging period of time. Believe me, I lived through it.
Yeah, yeah. Well, if you had money borrowed, you was affected, but people that, didn't have money borrowed, my dad was one of them. You weren't affected by it.
That's
As a matter of
absolutely.
fact, if you had hogs, you did pretty good in that time frame. But I can tell you one thing, if Dad didn't want to buy a farm because he was so nervous about how things were going and so many people going out of business. He didn't want to buy, but it seemed like you had the forethought that, this is a good time to get in this.
Well, true, except our limited partnerships we put together, Jim, had no debt. None of them ever had $1 worth of debt. They were 100% equity. Okay. And so that was a pretty, it's kind of like your father's theory of if you're not carrying a gigantic debt burden, you're probably going to get along okay. And that was our theory. And that turned out to be very, very fortunate. But again, going back to your dad for a second, and there were many, many people. I mean, you saw this very productive, very efficient, very nice neighbor who all of a sudden went broke because he couldn't pay his debt. And I mean, it put scars on all of us for many, many years, watching some very professional farming operations go out of business just because of cash flow.
That's right. And it was the good farmers that were affected because the bankers were going out trying to get them to grow their operation and they were falling for it and borrowing that money and then got hung up in that interest rate. And it just, affected good farmers more than anybody. And it
Absolutely.
took them down.
Took them down.
And so at Westchester grew, how big did that company grow? And then you kind of got into, you talked about the government type of investors, kind of speak to that.
Well, we once we got into governmental pension funds being our primary source of capital, And they loved it from the point of view that most of them didn't need any daily cash or annual cash flow. They were just looking for good investments, which obviously farms could provide. And so we invested very heavily. Our first government pension plan gave us a lofty $15 million, which I thought was more money than anyone would ever give anybody to invest in farms in late 1989. And our last government pension plan investor we had gave us $300 million. Okay, that's how fast it changed. And to tell you a little quick story, back when we were trying to get into that business, I hired a pension consultant from Wisconsin, met him in the Marriott Hotel in downtown Des Moines, which had not been open very long. And he said to me, and I paid him a fee for this. He said, "You want me to explain the pension industry to you?" And I said, yeah. He said, "They're like dairy cows." And I'm sitting there saying, I paid this guy money to tell me I'm looking for dairy cows. Well, it's one of the most accurate things that were ever said to me, because they are like dairy cows. Once one of them does it, then the next one wants to do it, and the next one wants to do it. When we landed our first government pension account, within 30 days, we had a second one. Within 6 months, we had a third one, and the third one was gigantic, relevant to their interest in putting money into a quality investment. And they didn't have any, hesitation against what had happened in farming. They were just looking for good investments to provide a long-term return to their pension recipients. And it was a very natural situation and a very productive situation, and that they were looking for long-term holdings. They weren't looking for a 3-year investment or a 4-year investment. They were looking for a 10, 15-year investment, and something they could lease to an operating farmer, and everybody would do well from it, and it did.
Yeah. And that was your selling point to them, is farmland has that stability and those returns. That was your selling point to them, I'm sure.
Correct.
Yeah. And so,
correct.
Go ahead.
No, I was just saying absolutely correct. And in that same time period, there was and this is on my signature line on my letterhead, all the pension plans in 1988, 89 were waiting on a very highly sought after analyst by the name of Barton Biggs with Morgan Stanley. He was going to write a white paper on the best investments. And everybody thought in the pension industry, he was going to tell them the 10 best stocks to buy. They all knew, they were all waiting for Barton Biggs to tell us what are the 10 best stocks. And he wrote this white paper, and Morgan Stanley doesn't even have a copy of it today. I have a copy of it. He wrote this white paper titled "Buy a Farm and Get Rich Slowly." And that's on the signature block on my email address, on the basis that was my theory with farmland: buy a farm and get rich slowly. And it's an opportunity to do exactly that. You have a modest cash flow, and over a long period of time, you'll have some appreciation, and your total return will be pretty attractive.
Yep. Did you have any issues, with the farm economy being so bad and the way land values had crashed? Did you have people that had reservations about buying into farmland, or how did you handle that?
Yes. And that was our problem in our first 5 limited partnerships that we did. Many of the people we talked to said, "Oh, I wouldn't want to invest in that. That's a terrible asset." My cousin got in trouble in his farming operation. Well, they didn't understand that this land that we were buying could be leased to operating farmers for a reasonable cash flow, and everybody would do well. And yes, that was a barrier, without a doubt, Jim.
Yeah. And then a selling point is zero vacancy. That's had to be a selling point too.
Right.
So we're in the 90s, and Westchester was growing leaps and bounds. So kind of going to the late 90s, early 2000s.
Correct. And it just, continued to grow, and actually, this is kind of fantasy land looking back, but from probably 1998 to well into 2010, we had more capital than we had farms. We could not find enough farms. And of course, we had a pretty stringent criteria, as you would look at with your appraiser's hat on. We wanted quality soils. We wanted to be in an area where there were a lot of quality farm operators who already existed, who would want to lease this land. and we looked for drainage and other characteristics. But we particularly in the early 2000s, from 2000 to 2010, we always had way more capital than we had available farms.
Wow. Interesting. Interesting. And so, was at the beginning, was most of those farms being purchased in Illinois or in the Midwest, or how did you accomplish getting all those farms bought?
Well, I had a pretty decent brokerage staff put together, not large, but 3 or 4 people, and we acquired a lot of farms in Illinois, Indiana, Ohio, and our small partnerships, a lot of Iowa farms as well. Then we branched out and started to buy a few farms in Colorado, and then a few farms down the Mississippi Delta, and then all of a sudden, one of our largest accounts at the time had a consulting firm, as I think I mentioned, study us and say their only criticism was that they should be investing in all of the quality areas of the U.S., not just in the Midwest. And that overnight took us from being a Midwestern company to a national company, where in the next 3 years we acquired over 30,000 acres of quality land in California, and to add to the portfolio.
And you said, you owned so much land. I think you was the biggest grower of almonds in California or something like that.
Well, at one point in time, we were the second largest almond grower in the world, and when we sold Westchester, we were still the third largest almond grower in the world. And that almonds were a crop that kind of fascinated me because, believe it or not, they're fairly easy to grow. The demand for them has been rapid, and they're a 25-year tree, so therefore you should be replacing 4% of the trees a year to stay status quo. And typically in the almond growing areas, they had not been planting 4% of new trees a year. So it was by the mid 90s, there was a real crunch as far as the available supply, and we capitalized greatly on it.
Yeah, interesting. And today that maybe isn't so good there now because of the water restrictions. Is that right, Murray?
Correct.
And you probably wouldn't invest there now today because of that.
I was out there for a retirement event a week ago Monday, Jim, and I would not be investing there today. And I was blessed to have the opportunity of getting us out of there at the right time.
Yeah. Is that water situation out there, is that a political thing that the politicians there just won't let them have water, or is it because there is an actual water shortage, Murray?
No, Jim, you're bringing up the wrong subject because I've become irrational on this subject. It's totally and completely political. Some of the state government regulations took the water away from farmers to give it to fish in the Sacramento River. Okay. They didn't think that some of the environmentalists protested that the fish weren't getting adequate water, and so, therefore to supply that additional water, it was taken away from farmers, believe it or not.
So there is plenty of water out there. It's just the government
There's
doesn't want to.
adequate water. There's some areas where there's been significant pumping where the water levels have gone down, but there's adequate water. If they could just straighten out the political environment of that crazy state, they'd be in good shape.
Right, right. And so any other states, I think you probably have invested in Florida too.
Yes.
What did citrus down there, or what was that, Murray?
Citrus, and then in addition to that, we had vegetable farms that grew tomatoes, green peppers, other specialty crops, and we leased that to operating growers who grew those crops. And again, Florida has some really good water regulations, in that you have to report to your local water district how much water you use, and they monitor your use, but they're not there to prevent you from using it. They're just there to make sure that you're using good principles and good environmental rules and regulations, shall we say. And they have some good rules, but they're livable from a farmer's point of view rather than irrational, as I would describe California.
Sure, sure, sure. Okay, so we're in the mid late 2010s. So you sold Westchester.
Yes.
What year did that happen?
That happened in 2010. But remember, when I sold Westchester, Jim, I sold the name, I sold the pension accounts, and I sold part of the farm management. I kept the auction company, I kept the farmland brokerage company, and I kept part of the farm management. And that got renamed Murray Wise Associates to my disgust, and I fought that but lost to my employees. And it became Murray Wise Associates, and then continued on to approximately 2021.
Okay, great. And then so what do you do now, Murray?
Well, I have a company called Murray Wise Land where I still work for a handful of clients who want me to handle their farm real estate transactions. And so, in addition to that, my wife and I have a fairly substantial portfolio of farmland, mainly here in the state of Iowa, and I look after the leasing of that and do a little bit of consulting work for two different entities. In addition to that, my wife and I have had a home building company in Florida for the last almost 15 years, which has been a good run, but I think it's over with, if you will, and we probably will be liquidating that in the next 6 to 8 to 12 months.
Yeah, sure, sure. Murray, let's talk about current market conditions. What do you think about this market right now? Can you kind of give me your thoughts on that?
Well, Jim, I'm not sure you want my thoughts on it because I think the current market is a little bit overpriced. It has been overpriced. I've been a little bit negative the market in the last 12 to 18 months. Now, that's not to say that they don't turn around and go higher from here, but the market is a little bit irrational. I mean, in January of this year, I acquired an Iowa farm for I think 12.7, and that same week, two separate farms sold in the state at auction, one for approximately 20,000 an acre, and one for 22,000 an acre. The market is, people come to me all the time and say, I own a quarter section at such and such a geographic location. What's it worth? And my answer is, you tell me who the five strongest local neighbors are, and I'll tell you what it might be worth. Okay. Again, I think with your appraisal hat on, Jim, you face a real challenging set of circumstances in this day and age, and that there is just great variation from geographic area to geographic area with similar soil types. So it's a little bit challenging, and I think the banks are trying to pull back a little bit. They're not as aggressive as they were 3 or 4 years ago. And so it's a time for caution in my eyes. Now, I could be dead wrong too, as I've been before, but I think it's a time for caution. Yet I'm just like your normal farmer, Jim. I can tell you that I've thought land is overpriced, and I've bought three small farms in the last 12 months. The last 8 months, I've bought three small farms only because they had joined me, and I had to have them. Okay, it wasn't that I was necessarily looking for another farm, but it did join me, so I absolutely just my mental approach was I have to have it, and it wasn't probably maybe the brightest decision I've ever made, but I'm happy with it.
Well, I tell you what, that's a comment I get a lot. I do a lot of posts on social media and I like posting those big prices, the 20,000 plus an acre. I love doing those and those comments I get is like, how can they afford that? That's not going to cash flow and my comment to them, I don't put it on social media, but I'm like, well, in 50 years, the heirs to that property are going to wonder why they didn't buy more ground at that price.
Exactly. Exactly. And I use the expression that my wife and I own quite a few farms, and I've never bought one that I didn't pay too much for, and I wouldn't sell one of them for what I paid for them. So
That's right. That's right. That farmland, you got to look at it in the long run. And that's why farmers can pay so much more than an investor or uh, is because their hold period's so much longer. Their hold period could be 50 years, could be 100 years. And
well,
over
that
the
brings up a really good point, Jim. The investor today, particularly the pension investor, is nearly non-existent on the basis that he just can't make these numbers work, he or she, and yet the farmer looking at a quarter section half a mile down the road, he'll make it work one way or the other. And most of them are to the greatest extent are just flat writing checks for them. It's not that they're putting on 80% leverage or anything crazy like that. They're just writing a check.
That's one thing I think has amazed me, Murray, watching this market. We had that run up after COVID. over 50% here in Iowa based on my auction data. That was amazing how fast that market moved. I couldn't believe it. But I was watching it every day. There was price records set in every county in Iowa, almost on a daily basis. And it's, I just, and then the market peaked, and then it kind of has come down about 10%. Now it's kind of flatlined. And, a year ago, we had an issue with no sales at auction. I remember writing about this in my newsletters. We'd have 8 to 9 no sales in this time frame last year. And I was like, this market is adjusting. It's taken some big adjustments. And then we kind of got to the election and it kind of started smoothing out. And
Right.
we got past the first year and it just seemed to be stable and maybe getting a little bit of legs underneath it. And I thought we was going to drop 20%, and then kind of flatline because that's kind of what happened in the last run up in the 2013 time frame. And it just doesn't seem like it's going to go any further south, to me. And I think part of that reason, Murray, is there's so much cash out here in the country. Can you comment on that?
Well, first of all, let me back up, Jim, and say that you and I have not discussed this before, but your expectation and mine was exactly the same. I expected it to back off 20%. I was sure it was going to back off 20%, and it didn't. And it backed off, 8, 10, 12%, somewhere in that range, in my opinion. And yet, and then flatline from there. But it really goes back to your subsequent question about cash out here. There is just phenomenal cash out there. On our standard auction contract, when I was still Murray Wise Associates, there used to be a line at the bottom. Who is your lender? What's his address and email address and telephone number? Okay. We took that off the contract because most 80, 90% of our purchasers weren't borrowing any money. So why did we need to know who the lender was? And that's just an example of how things are changed. And that there's lots of there's lots of retired or operating farm operators today sitting out here with millions of dollars of deposits in the bank looking for a home for it. And so it's hard to visualize that your projection and mine of a 20% back off is going to happen in the near future, because I don't think it is. I think it's flatlined, as you've said, and we'll probably go forward from here. But there are just very large amounts of cash sitting on the sidelines.
That's what I think it is. And we didn't have those vast amounts of cash back in the last run up in 2013 and at that time frame, give or take. There was some out there, but nothing like what we have today. And that's why I think, the market is I don't think it's going to go any further south. I know corn prices have fell off, because we've got a big crop coming, but I think it just talking to the farm realtors out here, there's a lot of optimistic people out here, and I just don't see it falling any further south.
Well stated. Very well
Yeah.
stated.
And so, um, Murray, what do you think? How are you still bullish on land the next 10 years, 30 years? Can you kind of speak to that?
Well, I'm bullish on land. When you look at the horizon that you've mentioned, Jim, of 10 years, 20 years, I'm very bullish. And yet, for the next 6 months, I'm not so bullish, but I've been a buyer at the same time. And yet, I think there's a lot more people like me today than there was 20 years ago, where in our land portfolio, the farms that are earmarked for our children are all tied up. So they can't sell an acre until they reach the age of 65, which I'll be long since dead. Okay.
Okay.
And the balance of our farms all go to a foundation which to the greatest extent, it supports two things. It supports a little bit of medical research, and it supports scholarships for ag students in universities. Okay. And that what's going into our foundation, the foundation's been in existence for almost 20 years, or maybe a little bit more than 20 years. But the foundation is a 70-year event. Okay, I mean, those farms that go into that foundation, and I've already put 3 of them in there. Those farms that go into the foundation, I mean, that they have a 45 to 50-year life remaining before they'll be sold, and that puts that land in a pretty rock solid position where our farm operators don't need to worry about getting their lease renewed because the farm's going nowhere.
Yeah, yeah, no, that would be multi-million dollar, multiple multi-million dollar family foundation.
Right.
Uh, Interesting stuff. Well, that's one thing that I see is, I appraise a lot of farms for estates here in Iowa, and just the massive wealth that's been generated the past several years from this run up in land prices. Murray, some of these families, it's not unusual to get $10 million worth of farmland up to, $50 million worth of farmland. It's just amazing how that adds up so fast.
Jim, 10 million is nothing today. I mean, it's absolutely not. I have a hard time saying it, okay? But it's nothing. And you said, 10 to 50. There's lots of farm families out here who have a land net worth much greater than $50 million. And I mean much greater. I was with one in early June that's in Illinois that surpasses 100 million by a significant margin.
Yeah, yeah, no, that's that, and those heirs are, uh, and so if you're talking to some heirs, wanting to sell real estate, would you tell them to sell in this market, or would you tell them to wait, or what would you tell them, Murray?
I tell each and every one of them not to sell. Within the last week, I've been with a farm family where the father and mother, particularly the father, looked at me and said, I've given my kids instructions, or if something happened to me, they should sit down and talk to you. Now I need to ask you, what would you tell them? And I said to the father, I can guarantee you one thing I would tell them is, if under no circumstance possible, sell the farm, keep the farm, enjoy the cash flow off of it, enjoy the income from it, and just keep the farm for the benefit of your children and your grandchildren. I would tell them, despite the fact I have a broker's license, I think in 9 different U.S. states, I would tell them, do not sell the farm.
You've got that buy and hold forever mentality, that's for sure.
Correct.
How do
Correct.
you feel? Just some real quick hitters. Tell me what you think about, this is a general question. Don't get, uh, I guess, irate. What do you think about wind turbines and solar panels?
Well, I'm not going to get irate, and I'm probably not going to answer your question on the basis that I was, generally speaking, opposed to them, and I hate to see high quality, that black land that you referred to originally.
Yeah.
I hate to see it planted in wind turbines and solar panels. Okay, and yet I have an 80 acres in Webster County that has a turbine on it, and I do enjoy that turbine one day a year. It's called September 1st because that's when I get a check. Okay, and the other 364 days, I hate the damn thing. Pardon my bad language. Okay,
Yeah.
and yet I have a very very great Western Illinois family that farmed 3 farms, my wife and I, and they took 2 sections of land, 2 sections of perfect high quality black land, and the whole 2 sections today is in solar panels. And I had a real problem with that until the father told me how much their check is every January. And
Yeah.
I've kind of come to like those solar panels. I learned about the check. And I'm
Yeah.
working also right now on sort of a consulting basis with an individual who's a large Iowa landowner who is looking at the possibility of a large number of solar panels, or a large number of turbines, I should say. And in one sense, I hate the things, but when you look at the income potential, it's hard to argue with them. And I'm sure with your appraiser's hat on, you just add up the income and say, "Oh yeah, that works."
Yeah, well, some of those payments on those wind turbines now are high, and I'm like, God, you got to take a look at it. They're so high. At the beginning, the wind turbine thing, they weren't. I question why you do that at the beginning of it, but now they've got those payments up there where I think you got to look at it. If they can put it kind of out of the way, like on a section line or not out in the middle of the field, I'd look at it. And then as far as those solar panels go, those payments they're paying is outrageous. I can't believe it. You'd have to look at it. I know it's tying up good farm ground, but they're paying so high. You got to take a look at it. I'm not for or against it. I'm just if they come to you and they're paying that kind of money, you got to think about it, I guess, is what I'm trying to say.
Jim, while we've been talking about this, you've said you've got to look at it 6 times, and that is really the conclusion. Okay,
Yeah.
you got to look at it. As much as I
Right.
hate it, you got to look at it. Okay,
Yeah. Yep. That's right. That's
I'm
right.
stealing your expression and repeating that, but you got to look at it.
Yeah. What do you say to people when they say these Chinese are out here buying all this farm ground? What do you say to them, Murray?
That's not the case at all. When you look at the amount of Chinese or even international land that's been bought in the last 5, 10 years is negligible. But the same token, what I am opposed by is there have been some Chinese entities make major land acquisitions. I think one in the North Dakota and one in Nebraska, close to an Air Force base. That I'm opposed to, and yet I don't know how you restrict it, but that does bother me. But as far as the amount of land that they've actually purchased, it's negligible.
Yeah, I've had people ask me that. I'm like, I don't know of any here in Iowa. Um, and I don't think they can compete with the farmers in the area, to be honest with you, Murray.
Correct. Correct, Jim.
And what do you say to people that say these investors are coming in here buying up all this farm ground and there's not owned by the local people? What do you say to people that say that, Murray?
If you look at the amount of investor absentee owned land, Jim, uh, it's such a small percentage. It's almost irrelevant. The operating farmer is the major landowner in the good areas of the Midwest or the good areas of the United States, and it will continue to be that way. Another interesting aspect, though, of that question, Jim, is and with your appraiser's hat on, you'll enjoy this. You look at the quality counties. We used to study this on every 3-year basis. Look at the amount of land that changes hands in the quality counties. There's lots of counties where 1% of the land doesn't change hands annually. And you'd
Yeah.
think death, there should be more than 1% of the land change hands, but it goes to show how rock solid it is. It's also been interesting to look at, and I always said if I had a reason to do a master's degree or something along this line, it would have been my field of study. There's a direct correlation, I guarantee you, into the percent of absentee owned land, mean that the children went off to Harvard or MIT or wherever, but they were ingrained, keep the land. And there's a direct correlation between soil quality and keeping the land. And I think that would be an interesting study for someone like you to put together.
Well, I can vouch for that. There's some counties here in Iowa, there's hardly any sales, and it's hard to do an appraisal in that county because there's so few sales.
Right, right.
So,
That's true.
well, Murray, let's finish this up. Anything else you want to talk about? Can you speak to your scholarship at Iowa State that you have there right now?
Well, we have more scholarships than just Iowa State. Again, and you can on one of our major programs you can apply for a scholarship for any ag school in the nation. But yes, Iowa State is the dominant one, and we do because Professor Harold Crawford had such an influence on my life. We have one program that's just in his name that we have funded, and that's turned into a lot of fun, and that we have currently 12 to 14 students just in that program. And someday that program will have 30, 40 students receiving ag scholarships. And we get all those students together in the fall each year. And it's just a ton of fun to listen to these kids because they're so bright, Jim. They're so bright.
Yeah.
And they have such a great outlook regarding the future of well-run American business that it's gratifying to say the least. We also have a program at Iowa State, very substantial scholarship for Professor Kevin Kimley and his entrepreneur class, where you can't apply for it. He selects the one student annually to receive it. And some of those students have hit the ball out of the park. I mean, they have to write a business plan or they don't get the scholarship. And some of those business plans have turned into major, major business entities. And Valerie and I are just very proud of the fact that we've been able to support those students in a way where they've had the resources to write a business plan and to pursue their dream. And nine times out of 10, their dream is a lot more creative than anything I came up with. And if I could, I know we're running out of time, but our very first recipient had, he wanted to do software for the smartphone. This is 14 or 15 years ago. He was the first recipient. I was at the banquet where he was announced. I had to lean over to the girl beside me and say, "What's a smartphone?" And she says, it's like that Apple thing you got in your hands. Oh, it was a smartphone. Okay. He was offered an enormous amount of money. And I went home that night, called my wife, and said, "We just the lot money. This student's got the dumbest idea I've ever heard. He's going to write ag software for a smartphone." He was offered an amount of money I'm not going to repeat on this interview, Jim, before the year was over by one of the major seed companies for his software. And that's the opportunity and challenges that guys like me can't think through. Okay. I mean, some of these kids are just so exciting to work with and to see what they're working on and accomplishing.
Yeah. Yeah. And they understand technology. That's for sure. That's what's going to be the future, is that new technology that's coming, and they understand it for sure.
Absolutely correct. Absolutely correct.
Murray, what'd you do for 4th of July?
I we had I want to point out that I did not plant this question with Jim in any way, but we had either 21 or 22 family members here in Ames, Iowa for the 4th of July. And we had the privilege of going up to Woolstock to the Stark Estate, where we had a great barbecue, and there was 150 local farmers and friends all in attendance. And Richard provided the greatest fireworks display I've ever seen in my life. I have stated I don't think there was a fireworks display anywhere in Iowa, including Des Moines or Cedar Rapids or Iowa City, that paralleled the fireworks that they put on up there. But it was a lot of fun, and it made one very proud to be an American.
Absolutely. Absolutely. That's great. That's great, Murray. Well, Murray, thank you for being on Land Talker TV. I love hearing about all your history and your knowledge about the land industry, and your optimism, and it's just fun to listen to you.
Great to be with you, Jim. Great to be with you.
Well, let's put an end to Land Talker TV today. An interview with Murray Wise, the father of farmland institutional investing, and we'll talk to you soon again. Thank you.